You want me to tell you what you don't see?
I've seen enough.
What's it look like?
Then just stop liking anime?
But I can't do that.
Here, take my watch. Put the knife away. Just put the
Nicole's fault.
Christ, I'm looking at Craigslist gigs just to buy a belt.
But as they say, life goes on.
For who?
I guess we'll never know.
When we look at a game like Class of '09, we typically don't think too much about it. I mean, it's a bunch of edgy, over-exaggerated conflicts making fun of, as well as making talks of social structures, in relatively modern-day high school. And that is what I, as well as what I would assume the majority of others made of it. That, yeah, it had some points that really made you ponder, but other than that, it was just a bunch of edgy jokes. However, when we saw scenes of hidden tapes that just begged to imply something more, like the polar opposites of Jeffrey and Nicole, messages, and extra videos that deployed different contexts to the characters in the world of Class of '09, and how the world almost seemed to actively distort itself in the Flipside, depending on preconceived choices of what the player chose. I know that a lot of people were let down by the Flipside, as well as feeling unfulfilled in the story of these characters, but hopefully I can figure out another story here, as well as give you and myself some closure, and maybe even find out what the upcoming animated show has in store. This is the Sacrifice Theory. Okay, real quick, before we begin, this is my first time doing a theory on something separate than what I'm known for, and although theory videos are really fun to make, they're also really hard compared to my other content, and that's due largely to the fact that I have to immerse myself and interact with the universe as a whole from multiple points of view in order to begin understanding and weaving a narrative with all the context we have available. And Class of '09 is no exception to this. However, if you want to support me and specifically want to see more theory content like this, please consider supporting me with either a Patreon subscription, a channel membership, sharing the video, or just by subscribing to me with notifications and leaving your own thoughts in the comments below. Like I said, I really do like making theory content, but once again, they also take a huge amount of time and effort compared to all my other content. But with my grift over, I will now begin the theory. Starting off, we should begin with some basic world building. Class of '09 is a realistic fiction universe that takes place in the mid to late 2000s in North Virginia, United States. It mostly observes the world through the eyes of the high school girl Nicole. Class of '09 has a cast of just around 30 characters, however only a handful of which are consistently reoccurring and present through most of the routes, with some minor characters even being only a one-time occurrence. The characters all behave in accordance with the late 2000s as well, dressing and acting the type. Though there is one exception to this statement, and that is that every single character in the entire game has their attributes, often specifically negative attributes, heavily exaggerated, far beyond what most would normally expect from real people. For instance, roughly over half of all students are addicted to at least some type of drug. Almost all teachers and/or adults in general are either child abusers, worse, or complacent in the abuse being committed by other teachers. And almost every student can be described by at least one of the 7 deadly sins. Nevertheless, it's not unheard of for aspects such as these to be overemphasized in order to tell a story like in shows such as Breaking Bad. But for Class of '09, it is literally every single character. And because these characters are emphasized so greatly based usually on their vices, it leads to that being their core role in the story Nicole leads, seeing them almost as if every single one of them is a boss fight in a game and leads to humorous dialogue in many cases. Which does make some sense, seeing as to how Class of '09 labels itself as a rejection sim, being antithetical to the constant pervy and sometimes outright degenerate dating sim games that are flooding around Steam. Instead of having a group of characters who will agree to romance/lovin' if you just choose the right dialogue tree, Nicole is the character who would likely never agree to a simple romance, if at all, and will not only act in a cruel manner, but in some cases outright kill her opponents. As for Nicole herself, she is a 16 to 18-year-old girl with a very attractive gene. She also comes across as intelligent and very charismatic in social situations. However, she is also extremely apathetic, ignorant, and a complete and utter sociopath. And she is well aware of this fact too, even seeming to take pride in it at some points. And despite seemingly having the capacity for intellect and problem-solving skills, Nicole also doesn't even remotely apply herself, and we find her skipping school to the point to where she likely skips more than she actually attends class. Thus, Nicole's really only objective in life appears to be doing drugs and relishing in her social power. And because of this, she really just finds herself as some miserable, insufferable little brat who really just wants to go home and watch Mythbusters. However, there are also people who make the argument that in several endings, she is merely defending herself and that she does actually have plenty of capacity for things. But that's just the thing about Nicole. There is some key aspect about her character that makes her so polarizing among the audience of this game. Like, there is this huge debate of whether or not she is some cool person who, even though she's bad, you end up rooting for her anyway, or if you hate her guts and find her deplorable. And how she alone, as a single individual, has so much power to manipulate and control situations, gives her this strange, profound aura about herself. But what is it about her? Does she just have protagonist privilege? Well, Jekka in the Flipside actually kind of outs that, as even with Nicole being non-protagonist, she still manages to affect the outcome of almost every single storyline, and Jekka even references this in the intro. So that's where our investigation will begin. With Nicole, her backstory, and most importantly, her dad. Now, despite her being this completely polarizing character, Nicole, by all biological sense and purposes, is a normal girl. Class of 09 is a realistic fiction setting, and Nicole is no exception to that, as she is also shackled to realism. But in regards to her lore, she actually gives us the cliff notes of her backstory herself in both the game's intros. And reading through it, you quickly start to feel bad for her, though you can also figure out quite a few things if you read in between the lines. Let's listen.
Make no mistake. I'm a sociopath. God, that sounded evil. Let's rewind a little. I grew up all over coastal America. House after restraining order, everything just kind of blends in. If the divorce rate is 50-50, my mom landed on tails like 8 times. So by the time I was 14, right? I moved from 7 different houses and attended 6 different school districts. After a while, you don't see a point in making friends. The Vitamin C graduation song? Yeah, I can't relate.
She was a lonely and quiet kid early on in life. She was a child of divorce 8 times and had attended new schools all over coastal America, thus she likely developed a cold perception of her mother early on. And judging by how she mentions restraining order, she likely also developed a cold perception of men in general early on too, though it probably wasn't enough to perceive them with the level of seeming disgust she has for them now.
But then one year, all of that almost changed. For the first time ever, I found myself in a school for 2 consecutive years, going on 3. The popular girls would talk to me all the time. And they were just stupid. Like they'd always been pretty. Never left out. Never alone. And when I think about it, all the thinking I've ever done was when I was alone. I was nice about it and thought I'd always be nice about it. Finally in one place to build a steady reputation. And then life said, fuck that. My piece of shit gamer brother got us evicted for pirating breakbeat mixtapes.
Ironically, she shows contempt for other girls for them having never been alone, before rounding back to how she still felt alone and how she almost appears to prefer that, as it's the only time where she thinks critically. But when she was finally in a place for more than a year, her brother got her evicted for something stupid, forcing them to move, no doubt building that cold perception even more.
And that's when she told me, we're moving out of state, and I just got settled. I said, fuck you, I'm living with Dad. He's just a neighborhood down. I put the boxes down, go over, knock on the door, and boom! A gunshot! I walked in. Floor looked like a whole-ass video game, just blood everywhere. And get this, his side note was stuck to the fridge with a Cookie Monster magnet. All he wrote on it, Nicole's fault.
Nicole says no and immediately stated that she preferred to live with her dad instead, similar to Jekka's starting situation in the Flipside, only to find out he ended himself moments before she arrived, basically forcing her to go with her mom, move to a new school, and lead her on the paths that we see in Class of 09. A lot of information is given here, and no wonder Nicole has this bitter, often outright hateful view on men, and doesn't really care much for other girls as well. Though, out of everything in her backstory, the most shattering thing we learn is about her father's death, and how very cold his last act was towards her. It's not uncommon for people to blame themselves for a friend or family member's death, asking ourselves if only we did this or that they'd still be here. Even though in most of these cases it's not their faults, or in larger part of anyone's for that matter. However, Nicole's father not only ended himself, but made no mistake in blaming her for it. And Nicole is only 15 or 16 around this time, so having one of your parents die and having them objectively blame you for it is rather cruel to say the least. However, Nicole flips this almost immediately by seemingly showing basically no remorse, only seeming to care about her dad dying because it affected her ability to move, showing little to no emotion of this, almost like it's a defense mechanism. This is a really depressing situation, however, some things aren't adding up. First off, she claims that she grew up all over coastal America, moving 7 different times and attending 6 different schools. However, her father, who supposedly would have willingly taken Nicole in, was also apparently just a neighborhood down. Was this always the case? Did her father move houses along with her mother even though they were divorced too? Divorced parents often do that when they separate in situations where there's joint custody. However, if she was moving based solely on her mom's decision, and she had the choice to live with her father at any time, why would she not just do that to begin with? I kind of have an answer for that, and it has to do with custody laws of neighboring states. In Virginia, the state where Class of '09 supposedly takes place, there is no age limit to when a child's opinion will be considered when the court decides which parent they live with. However, in the neighboring state, Maryland, the age which it's considered is 16, meaning Nicole's origin state is likely Maryland. However, that doesn't get us anywhere on its own, and this story still doesn't fully make sense to me. Simply because it makes no sense for him to be this way and do what he did. His note gives off the obvious implication that he hated Nicole and she was horrible enough to drive him to his own death. It obfuscates Nicole's reasoning for being able to move in with her father at any time. If her father had any hateful view of Nicole, why would he move houses with Nicole's mom this whole time when he could have easily surrendered sole custody to her and be done with it? It's not because of Gamer Brother either, because he's a decade older and he can choose to live with whoever at any time. And why would Nicole consider him her second Christmas, meaning he clearly cared enough about her to at least get her presents and make somewhat of an effort? And why would he seemingly all of a sudden, just moments before Nicole goes to see him, end himself? Like he was fighting for something and he just, out of nowhere, gave up. The issue is clear here. If he really hated Nicole enough to end himself over it, he would have just left a long time ago. And quite frankly, Nicole isn't the most trusted narrator either. However, I have a theory. That theory is, Nicole actually did care about her father, and on top of that, they were really close. Notice how Nicole references almost everything in her first backstory with negative context. Her mom getting divorced 8 times, her brother being the reason she has to move, and popular girls being, in her eyes, stupid. Ironically, despite this being polar opposite behavior we see from her in Class of '09, she actually didn't appear to originally have a problem with boys hitting on her. She also didn't have a negative context for her dad all throughout her story up until she referenced him for the first time at the end, which after he ended himself and blamed her. She could very well have had a positive or at least neutral relationship with her father up until the end, which is why she neglected to mention him despite him being present. Because if he was awful to her, wouldn't she think to include him? But since he was good to her up until his death, and he hadn't done anything she could be upset about him until then, but also unable to talk about him in a positive light because she saw what he did as blind betrayal, she can only mention him at the end.
That makes me feel a lot less bad about my dad himself.
Bet you didn't fucking feel bad in the first place.
You don't know that.
I guess you do wear a lot of stud belts.
Since this is supposed to be a sad upbringing story and that he had the Nicole's fault note, she immediately developed contempt for him as well as hatred for men. Listen to her speak.
I'm Nicole, by the way. Hi. What the fuck did I do to him? Maybe I missed the office softball game?
Was Nicole always a sociopath? Maybe, but likely not. If anything, she was probably fine up until her dad's death. What makes more sense is Nicole actually had a dad who loved her, and may have even been very close with her, with the time that he was actually able to see her. And when he died, blaming her in the process, it completely pushed her over to the edge, giving her an outright hateful view of men that she didn't previously have. One more thing for this part of the theory, and it's what sells me more about Nicole actually caring about her father, and vice versa, is a little bit of a sneak-in from what I saw with the Class of '09 re-upload intro. I'll play that clip for you now.
For everyone who doesn't know, my mom's a bitch, my dad shot himself, my life sucks, and my brother's on a watch list. Not in that order, or maybe, I don't know.
Not in that order. Watch her right when she says that. Arrange the 4 images associated with her statements from left to right, and in doing so, it rearranges only 2 pictures. Switching around the 2 statements, my dad shot himself, and my life sucks. If we apply the same audio to the new ordering of the image, we get Nicole, who, assumed in the picture, is crying in the shower to the statement, my dad shot himself. And why I think this is significant is, Look through the entirety of Class of 09, and now the show, there is very little display of Nicole showing any great emotion at all, ever. Most of everything she does is just apathy or anger, but in this single image, we have what looks like her crying. She's not crying because her life sucks, she plays indifferent to it every single day. She's crying because her father is dead. Nicole cared about her father, Nicole was likely very close to her father, and when her father died blaming her in the process, she probably saw that as the ultimate betrayal, going almost a complete 180 and seeing all men with this apathetic, hateful demeanor. Why did he do this? Well, I have a theory for what might have actually happened to Nicole's father, but it will have to wait until later in the theory. As for right now, whether her mom said something to her dad about Nicole, whether Nicole was a bad apple from the start, I'm wrong and her father was just a bad apple, or her father was framed or forced into this. Either way, it is still suspicious how she was only moments away from him when she heard the gunshot, and how it was pinned to the wall with a Cookie Monster magnet. Nevertheless, we now have seemingly attached at least a valid reason as to why Nicole acts the way she does, around men and people in general. Therefore, I think it's time to move on to Nicole's interaction with her peers and others to see if she is acting with or without merit. Now, in Class of 09, there are basically no good guys, and unfortunately, although I like to breathe hopium into everyone, that probably includes Nicole's father, too. Shifting gears, though, in almost every scenario in Class of 09, we see almost everyone willing to say or do some pretty amoral stuff in order to justify their own means. We see both Principal and Nicole's mom blatantly ignoring abuse in order to make their own lives easier. We see over half the male cast willing to say or do some pretty immoral shit just to potentially smash, and of course we have Nicole, who, if we are taking every single ending into account, that she has done more bad than every other character in the game. And it led me to ask myself a pretty disturbing question. Does Nicole even deserve to be happy? Because when I asked that question out loud, I immediately realized just how cruel it is to even ask. If someone does or doesn't deserve to have happiness, even after I attached all this context to Nicole. And as cruel as it is, even though we know what we do about Nicole, if she can't come up with a positive outcome, the answer would probably be no. However, I think the answer can actually be yes in Nicole's case, simply because there are people who are objectively worse than her, though there are also people who are objectively better than her. So I went through every character in the Class of 09 and compared them to Nicole, and I came up with 4 to 5 characters who are objectively worse than her. The first character is Coach Colby, who is fairly self-explanatory, as not only does he commit hate crimes, drug his own students, record them while they're changing, most likely consume Dan Schneider content, and attempt to chomp his students, but he will also chomp Nicole in one of the endings, ending her life right there too. Followed shortly by the counselor, who is basically a more subtle variant of Coach Colby, though in the Flipside he evolves into a raid boss P. Diddy. We have the principal, who is very well aware of both of these men's behaviors, yet chooses not to get involved, so she's going here as well as that of Mr. White, who you could also argue is on the same level as Nicole. Up until he starts killing people, then he's objectively worse. Gamer Brother also falls under as objectively worse for obvious reasons. You could argue that several characters in the game, with the exception of maybe a few people, are worse than Nicole, and most would do so, including myself. However, I doubt anyone would argue for any one of these characters. As for people who you could argue are worse than Nicole, you can probably easily put several members of the roster. You have Kyler, Mr. Katz, it really depends on before or after the flip side, Mr. LeRae, Nicole's mom, Jekka's dad, Jeffrey on account of one of his endings, and even a few others. However, there is just as many characters who did nothing significantly wrong and didn't deserve Nicole's wrath. For instance, Megan, although she is very bratty and up her own ass, she didn't deserve to be humiliated by Nicole to the point to where she's now likely traumatized for life, and Hunter, although a complete idiot and in the wrong himself, also didn't deserve to be blatantly manipulated by Nicole. Carradine didn't deserve anything Nicole did to her in any respect, bullying her to the point of relapsing, sabotaging her day with Jeffrey, or tricking her into participating in sexual degeneracy. Nicole's mom, well, she just sucks, I'm not gonna lie, but the fact that she died all because Nicole wanted to crunch on some of her pills, and that she doesn't even seem to remotely feel bad for it, is not only wrong, but next level cruelty.
Oh god, everything's getting dark. Call 911!
Okay, Mom. Mom?
What the fuck? Mom! Fuck, where's the phone?
So, how was the funeral?
When is expected?
Meaning?
My aunt pulled out a gun.
Weird. Nicole, this might be a weird question, but, did you cry at all after your mom died?
No, but I used it to get out of some stuff. Does that count?
It does appear that Nicole, though, is once again able to show concern for her mother, but then dissolves her actual emotions, again replacing it with apathy. This time, likely even more so than with her father. That or she's hiding her emotions like how she was crying in the shower. But there are plenty of other stories of characters who either did nothing comparable to Nicole or nothing bad at all and still got burned by her. So if we were to filter Nicole as a personality through all of her roots and what she's capable of, it's fair to call her an awful person. Though I do think her mean and punky personality also kind of plays a little bit on both her style and her voice actress. Elsie Lovelock did a phenomenal job on Nicole, giving her this bratty yet confident personality, though similar to other characters that she's voiced, like Uzi the Vampire Robot and Murder Drones, that one animated show where the plot is impossible to follow. And before you ask, no, I'm not trying to link these two shows or push some megabrain theory or insinuate that Nicole's personality is Uzi's AI core and Nicole is some descendant of an ancient vampire due to her god-tier charisma. Please don't use this audio to make some stupid shorts edit. Like, dude, I can already hear the funk music, just don't do it. However, back to the characters who are objectively worse. I raised the idea that if Nicole, who in a majority of all her routes she burns at least someone, can come up with an ending where only these people lose in the end, then the answer is yes. She can have a happy ending, and it would be an overall positive outcome. Unfortunately, she has a few routes to get there as well. One in specific that I actually think is one of the only two possible canonical endings of the original Class of 09 game, and I enforce this with the Flipside being after the end. This ending is the Nicole graduation ending, where Nicole graduates, but before doing so, she gets Coach Colby fired. Honestly, he deserves way worse and then some. She also gets Kyler expelled, arguably also deserved. Jeffrey tries to get her back by screwing her over with an underwear photo, but Kyler ironically saves her by destroying the photo lab, and even on her way out, she also forces Principal Len to take accountability as well. Furthermore, Nicole actually shows some level of ambition afterwards, an actual question she asks and she wants to solve or at least understand, an ambition that may actually have a future. And lastly, she mentions her dad again, and how I think we can all agree,
watching your dad kill himself really fucks you up.
So here we have it. Nicole makes it to graduation, becomes an adult, and the only people she burns are both in self-defense and are those that are bad people, with the exception of maybe Kyler, though him breaking the photo lab is really his own fault. And in my honest opinion, for Nicole, overall, even though the settlement ending makes her rich and the YouTube ending makes her famous, I actually think this is the best ending for Nicole. But if this is one of the two canonical endings to Class of 09, then I still have a bit to prove. However, that starts with me talking about one of the other characters. Someone who, despite not being Jekka, being one of the most involved in many of Nicole's routes, including this one. Someone who she runs into very frequently, and in case it's not clear, I'm talking about Jeffrey. Now, Jeffrey himself is quite an irony, because he was actually one of the least morally bad characters. He had fairly harmless hobbies, applied himself in school, and was generally rather friendly, even if more often than not, it was really him just using the nice guy strategy to try and fail to get girls. And since I, like most, after learning of this game, consumed a hefty amount of its content on YouTube, on occasion I would even see comments on videos of people claiming that he was solid and good, even ones claiming Jeffrey was likable and that despite him having a rough time in high school and being a bit of a pervert and degenerate, that he was an overall solid person with a likely bright future.
Not for long!
And then the Flipside came out, and you can throw 80% of what I just said in the trash.
Sorry, I'm a Mac user.
Okay, now you can throw everything I just said in the trash.
Know your fucking place, trash!
Among Us.
But Jeffrey on the outside seems like a rather inconsequential character, being just another victim in Nicole's maliciousness most of the time. Sometimes deserved, most of the time not. And dozens of people have pointed this out far before I have, but Jeffrey is also basically the antithesis of Nicole in many aspects. Nicole is a popular, charismatic, pretty girl who is also a sociopath, and Jeffrey is a social outcast, repless, generic nice guy, who, even in the art style of anime where roughly 90% of the characters are drawn as attractive, is still perceived to be ugly by a majority of the cast, most notably with the girls. And I do somewhat agree with the idea that Jeffrey is the antithesis of Nicole, but I also believe that they are similar in a lot of ways too. And in some cases that they are actually more alike than almost the entire cast. Though, before I even get to the flip side, I want to generally analyze Jeffrey beforehand in regards to Nicole. Nicole, at a base value, is not a good person. However, neither is Jeffrey. Yeah, in most cases, at a base value, he's just a kid struggling in the social landscape, but in other cases, specifically when he's attacked, he's a completely deplorable pervert, and in one specific case, even capable of mass murder. And yes, I think most people can be pushed to do horrible things, even innocent, good people if they are pushed hard enough to the edge, but in Jeffrey's case, he does something truly vile, and on top of that, he can very easily be talked out of it. Listen to this. Nicole isn't even being that nice to him here. She's barely doing less than rubbing salt into what he's saying. Whether Jeffrey is really that alone to the point where something that simple speaks volumes to him, or does it bring his character into question when we ask what type of a person he is? A lot of us have these loser periods in primary schooling. I did in middle school, but I largely broke out of it after my first year in high school, so I try to empathize with people like Jeffrey because in a lot of ways, things do get better, and I can understand how sad, desperate, and lonely some people can be when they're a social outcast. To summarize, Jeffrey is in fact not terribly or maliciously evil, but he is also a genuinely flawed person with a lot of vices that he may or may not address in his future, and if the flip side is anything to go off of, he didn't. But also, some of this might not all be Jeffrey's fault. We can find out through loose references to his family that Jeffrey doesn't have a good home life or relationship with either of his parents. His father is a gun nut, and although that's not a problem on its own, apparently also has a slurry of other issues, and is largely absent from Jeffrey's life. And I haven't even gotten to his mother in the Flipside yet, and in all honesty, if the Flipside and its character changes are confirmed, I would go as far to say that she is worse than most of the other characters in this franchise. But there is one final scene I need to talk about before we move on to the flip side, and it's actually not on any of the traditional routes. Rather, it is the secret scene unlocked after getting a majority of the routes in the original game. It takes place right after graduation ceremony. Jeffrey was valedictorian, and Nicole and Jekka are talking after Nicole did something at the end of the ceremony. And I think I'm just gonna let this scene play a bit.
Where the fuck were you?
Long story. Well, no, it's actually short. I just don't feel like telling you. Is that the ceiling for us?
What's the big idea, huh?
I don't know, I only have little ideas.
Yeah, and I got medium ideas.
You ruined the whole graduation ceremony. I was valedictorian and everything. What did anybody do to you anyway? Everybody's always nice to you and calls you pretty, and all you want to do is hurt them.
Well, shoot, if they call me pretty.
And more than that, they give you things, always help you, and then I just see you screw them over. All I see is you being mean for the sake of being mean. It's like a game to you.
You want me to tell you what you don't see?
I've seen enough.
Have you ever seen a man 3 times your age ask you to fuck him?
Like just this week, or...
What? Be serious!
Sorry, how about 60 texts in one night all threatening you if you don't go out with the pizza delivery man who sent them?
How would you let some crazy guy get your number like that in the first place?
I ordered pizza with my cell phone. I know your pasty white ass wouldn't get what being in demand is like, but it's a tough job, Jeffrey.
And you don't even get paid.
But if you do, you're a whore. Are you getting it, Jeffrey?
So people like you. Boo-hoo.
They don't just like us. They're obsessed with us. Obsession leads to a lot of crazy shit. And you give the wrong bitch enough crazy shit in her life, she just might snap on everybody.
Sounds like a good problem to have. I'd rather be surrounded by craziness instead of still being lonely. You don't know what that feels like. You don't know what life is like wanting a partner and being ignored by everyone. You're spoiled by social attention and you don't even know it. Like I said, socially spoiled.
A little bit.
Can someone be spoiled by not having a daily fight or flight moment?
What? Like I should be you for a day?
You're way too ugly to be her for a day.
Well, she gets too much attention to know how much it hurts to be me for a day.
I guess we'll never know.
And wow. I honestly couldn't think of a more perfect scene to be the secret ending. Not only does it entirely line up with my claim that the adulthood ending is canon, but there is so much of a real, honest, head-to-head argument between Nicole and Jeffrey here. In this scene, we see Nicole and Jeffrey's internal victimhood complexes clashing with each other right in front of us. Nicole, for the first time it seems, actually tries to give Jeffrey a glimpse of the problems she struggles with in her own life, compared to him. and he openly downplays her in a rather cruel manner. However, she then uses that spiel to then justify her own sociopathic and shitty behavior, claiming very specifically that one day she might just snap on everybody, strangely similar to what I was just referring to with Jeffrey. If you don't think Nicole is capable of that after everything I've said about her, in one of the endings she literally gets the whole school firebombed and shows no sympathy at all. A large part of Class of 09 had Nicole downplaying and bullying Jeffrey, but when it finally became Jeffrey's turn to show a sympathetic side to her, the same thing he was practically begging for her, and others for the whole game, he did pretty much the same thing to her. Yeah, it likely wouldn't have changed Nicole's opinion on him much. If anything, it might have even made him seem like an even bigger pushover, but showing empathy, even to people you hate, or people that have wronged you, even when they don't deserve it, is an extremely powerful as well as difficult virtue to have sometimes. And it seems neither one of them had it in the end. But going back to it, both of these characters are in pain, and both of these characters are suffering. Both of their struggles and feelings of anger are ultimately valid, though they become the problem when they randomly and blindly lash out at others. Instead of being mature or coming up with practical solutions, they both blame the world and fate for their situations. And yes, luck and the world had very much of a place in their upbringing, but it is ultimately both of them who choose to put themselves in these situations going forward. Jeffrey, although scrawny and weak, has likely nothing really in common with anybody else, could work himself out of that hole by learning to work out and doing so regularly, and maybe taking a class on how to socialize and not dominate his life by his sexual desires. Ironically, he was doing that last part, but Nicole kinda soured him. Plus, it's school mandated, so it probably sucked anyways. And Nicole could probably avoid a large percentage of her problems by not entertaining objectively bad people and lunatics, while also not being a pushover like in the book's Puzzles Pawns ending, not lashing out at people for nothing, and stop doing whatever drugs she get her hands on. Both Jeffrey and Nicole could become very respectable people, and in a few of the endings it seems as though they almost do. Now, before I get deeper into the Nicole and Jeffrey talk, I want to clarify that I don't think that Nicole and Jeffrey would be a couple. As a matter of fact, I don't think either one of them should date or be near anyone romantically, at least until they have years of therapy. An actual therapy, not Diddlesaurus over here. But I think I've waited long enough to talk about the final installment of the Class of 09 franchise. Before the anime comes out, that is. I now want to go into what is, as of currently, the finale of the franchise, a retcon of a fair amount of characters, and the 5 possible true endings to the original Class of 09 game's storyline. Let's talk about the flip side. Now, the flip side sets itself as different from the first 2 games in a variety of ways, and the first and most obvious way is that Jekka is now the protagonist, and you are now seeing a more objective view of Nicole through her eyes, though at the same time, that might not be entirely based on perspective. Immediately, we are placed with the crossroads decision to either start post-graduation at home, where Jekka struggles with looking for a job before she begins college in the fall, or she begins in school seemingly in senior year. If she starts at school, it simply begins with her and Nicole causing trouble as usual, as well as having trouble follow them in their wake as a natural response to their existence. If she starts at home, she awakes to the sound of her mother and father getting a divorce, and thus putting her in a single-parent household where she willingly chooses to live with her father. Ironically, this isn't the worst thing, and Jekka even originally perceives it as a good thing, though for selfish reasons. No, the real bad comes from Jekka now needing to get a job, and even though this is a very common and necessary transition, her dad decides to integrate her into this crucial step of adulthood in one of the worst ways possible, screaming and threatening violence, forcing her to pay several different bills almost immediately, and viciously berating and gaslighting her anytime she messes up. However, in both of these routes, we see Jeffrey not as a side character, but often as the main topic of discussion. Whether the school route, where there's an entire anti-bullying seminar due to Jeffrey alone, it's semi-implied that the entirety, or at least the majority of the school, does not like Jeffrey, even though there was a handful of people who were at least neutral to him in the original. Crispin takes fall damage, and this leads to an eventual assigned seating. I don't understand the logic behind that. And for some reason places Jeffrey right next to Nicole and Jekka. I really don't understand the logic behind that. And in this discussion, Jeffrey starts drawing a luridly made anime character, even though they are only 13. And both Nicole and Jekka actually make a good point to how weird and wrong this is for Jeffrey to consume this instead of just making fun of him. but Jeffrey doesn't take any of this into account and just runs it as bullying. This is the second time we see Jeffrey brushing off something Nicole said that, even though she herself is a bad person, would actually help him if he took it to heart. Shifting over to the home start, Nicole and Jekka go to the mall looking for a job for Jekka, where they once again run into Jeffrey. He starts out friendly, just explaining what he's doing, but when Nicole once again makes another insult joke to Jeffrey, he finally says no and actually tries to stand up to Nicole and Jekka, and in this scene, Jeffrey almost gets it right.
So what? After graduation, I realized that sex is kinda overrated. I'm into plenty of other stuff beyond girls and their high standards.
Is bathing a standard?
You know, Jeffrey, some girls would lower their standards if you could get them hired at the bookstore you're working at.
Sorry, but no can do. Recession and all.
Bitch, don't lie to us.
You think I could just give you handouts because you're a girl?
Avi, the workforce is biased against women. Help us out.
Help her out. I don't want no bitch-ass job.
You girls always pull that feminism card. Sorry, but your damsel in distress act ain't working here, tuts. Oh, I'm gonna be late, women.
Yeah, he initiated this conversation, but he's correct. Sex is overrated, or at least overhyped. And you could easily apply the second thing he said to both sexes, but the point still stands, at least for younger people. And having other aspirations in life besides sex and romance is a huge green flag. He even shuts down Jekka and doesn't even entertain the idea of giving her a job, giving her a similar made-up bullshit excuse that he's probably used to receiving. And if he walked away after this and didn't bother speaking to them again, since clearly nothing good will come from him interacting with them, I would commend him for it. But judging on his last two comments, it's clear he has started to develop some anti-women mindset. Being able to back away from dating altogether for a while in your late teens and throughout your 20s is oftentimes a good option so you can focus on developing your own future. It's something that a lot of people have done, including myself. However, you can't in that time develop a resentment or hatred of the opposite sex, as not only does it make it more likely that you'll never be in a genuine relationship and end up alone, but it also bars you from crucial viewpoints, interactions, and friendships you wouldn't have had otherwise. Even more so, not only after this does Jeffrey come back to Jekka later on, meaning most of what he was saying was likely just hot air, but he initiates single-handedly the most degenerative story routes in the Class of 09 franchise. And these two routes and how Nicole interacts with Jeffrey instead of Jekka make up half the Flipside's endings. Now, there's a lot of retcons and changes made to the characters in Flipside. For instance, Jekka goes from being almost neutral to Crispin to hating his mere existence, ironically even when he wants to be helpful. The counselor goes from being a child chomper to a raid boss P. Diddy. Miss Ames is entirely morphed into the new counselor in his place, completely replacing her insufferable past persona. Almost the entire school is morphed into not liking Jeffrey, as stated earlier. And Mr. Burladay goes from being the best character to still being the best character.
Wait, can I throw in an extra 100 for you to roleplay?
Roleplay what?
Remember the girl in the 1984 Apple commercial that throws the hammer through the screen?
Maybe it was on Family Guy once?
Can you be her?
How would you work that into what we're doing?
Dude, even when he's falling to degeneracy, he's still the best character, hands down. Though, besides Miss Ames, two of the biggest retcons comes from those same two characters I've referenced throughout this theory, Nicole and Jeffrey. I've already talked a little about Jeffrey, but essentially, Jeffrey went from being a nerd in high school who was just on a town turn to a total loser with no friends, and if we were to believe a certain text message, he was also a horrible student, thus likely has no positive future. Nicole goes through an equally drastic change. Throughout Nicole's POV, she can be often considered justified, but in Flipside, in those same two routes with Jeffrey, Nicole isn't justified, the victim, the hero, or anything. In those two routes, Nicole is the predator. Spoiler warning for the Flipside's endings, but in every single route, someone dies. Nicole's influence on Jekka causes one of the deaths. In one, she is the main reason why it happened, and in another, she directly kills that person herself. Nicole went from being mostly bad but somewhat defendable on occasions to being a total scourge. Nicole in the Flipside is so vile in most of her routes that I even feel like it's a bit of a mischaracterization of her, and I don't even like Nicole. But let's contrast that to Jeffrey's retcons. Jeffrey, as I stated, went from a smart kid who just turned out to be a loser in high school to a total loser with no aspirations or redeeming qualities at all. Or at least that's what it seems. In one of the routes, specifically the one where Jeffrey dies, you gain access to a message that supposedly was written by his mother. And in this message, it is one of the cruelest things, if not the cruelest thing, I have heard throughout this entire series. I'll go ahead and just let you read the whole thing here. And yeah, reading that through, that's pretty fucking disgusting. At first I thought that Jeffrey just needed to grow up and hopefully eventually the shit talking he endures would cause him to realize that he needs to change. Now I realize it's not all his fault, it's his mother's. Just because he was socially slow and a bit of a degen, she completely abandoned her son, giving up on him, even more so giving up when he was only in middle school. Meaning she decided her only child was a lost cause before he was even halfway through with primary school. Needless to say, his mother is a horrible person, and probably the worst person in Jeffrey's life. Forget Jeffrey's father or stepfather, who are largely absent. His mother was present in his life, yet simultaneously, she might as well have not even have been there at all. So now we take this in contrast with Jeffrey, that he didn't have the best grades, as what his mom says compared to what we currently believe to be the canon ending of the original Class of 09, the adult ending where Jeffrey is the valedictorian. And now we can ask ourselves the question, what's more likely? That Jeffrey didn't even apply himself in school, or his mom just didn't care enough to see? Though the third option is that this is yet another retcon due to Class of 09's inconsistent storytelling based on numerous endings, and nothing can be fully proven, but I'm writing a theory here. And even if Jeffrey did have average grades, who the hell cares? It's high school. Plenty of people do bad in high school and move on to great intellectual pursuits and success in general. And finally, we take this in contrast to Nicole in regards to her parents, and we come to the conclusion that Jeffrey also had horrible parents like Nicole, though unlike Nicole, who had a bad mother but a father who checked out on her, blaming her in the process, we have Jeffrey, who had an absent father but a mother who also checked out on him, blaming him in the process. Nicole and Jeffrey truly are two sides of the same coin in the worst ways. They are both idiotic in the way that they behave, but are actually smart and self-aware of their situation and have the potential to do great. They both feel resentment and anger towards their respective opposite sexes due to parental figures that they have no say over, but they each still might have a bright future under very specific circumstances. Now, some of you might have an idea where I'm going with this, but we have one final thing to talk about before that, and that's me figuring out the strange secret videos littered throughout the games. Who this secret character is, and the actual secret significance he has on the entire Class of 09 series. Okay, so in Class of 09, the re-upload, and the Flipside, there are a handful of secrets you can get, both from text messages after certain routes, random videos, and even the video that plays when you open the game. I've already talked about some of these secret videos, like the last one of the original Class of 09 game, where Jeffrey and Nicole clash with each other. And I've talked about some of the texts, like the one from Jeffrey's mother. However, a handful of these video secrets appear to not have any implication of Class of 09 at all, and don't even have the anime-esque style of it, being an actual IRL recording. However, I do actually think these videos hold significance in the greater lore of the game. The first video we'll be taking a look at is the one that I think holds the least significance, and that is the re-up secret video, and I'll just go ahead and let this play.
Take it easy, man. Holy fuck. Hold on, no. Here, take my watch. Just put the knife away. Just put the knife away.
What about me?
I do think there are some significant takes we can get from this clip, but I'm pretty sure the main and actual reason this was even included was to hint at the future release of the Flipside, as the re-upload came out second in the series with a hint to the third, which I believe due to the very brief freeze frame of Jekka, hinting at her significance in the next plotline, which turned out to be true because of the Flipside. I wasn't even the first one to conclude this either, this one seemed pretty clear. But what else can be extracted from this? Well, we have to first ask ourselves, who's the one filming? A lot of people seem to believe this to be Jeffrey due to the idea that Jeffrey is seen as a bit of a creep, as well as how common he is with the plot. Though, I don't see any open and active evidence of this character being really any character we already know, so I have a more open idea of who it might be. Well, one of my thoughts besides Jeffrey was the game's creator, SBN3. This is mainly due to the fact that SBN3 is the voice actor for Jeffrey and Kyler, two of the more involved characters, and even a few others. Plus, these are all from clips taken in the real world. However, SBN3 sort of uses both Jeffrey and Nicole as mild inserts of parts of himself as a character, so I do think this kind of contradicts this idea, but it's there. But another reason why I don't think this is Jeffrey is because Jeffrey is a bit of a weakling, and in the video, this person is in a wheelchair escaping from a hospital, and even escaping security or the police while also wielding a knife. Now, you don't exactly need too much strength to kill someone with a knife, especially if you have the element of surprise on them, but to escape a hospital after seconds prior having been wheelchair-bound, wielding a knife, maybe a gun too, and having security or at least some able-bodied individuals chasing you, would at the very least require a high amount of endurance and stamina as well as willpower. And since Jeffrey lacks any even remotely athletic traits, I think we can safely rule out Jeffrey. Now, whoever I think this is, whether it's SBN3, Jeffrey, an unnamed character, or someone else I'm not realizing, is to be determined. But make no mistake, this character does have a huge amount of significance. Now, there's also the message, if God isn't watching, who is? This phrase is reoccurring with all the real-life secret messages, and I do have an answer for it, but first let's start by watching Flipside's 3 secret videos. First, the video we're watching. This is a short one, so I'll just let it play fully again.
But who is God?
It shows someone holding a phone in what I assume is a mirror before being shot and displaying the message, God is watching, before the statement plays, but who is God? Once again, I have an answer for this, but we aren't done just yet. As for where the murder takes place, I can think of 2 places, and that's either a school or a hospital. However, that doesn't get us anywhere on its own. Let's see the next video, Stop Playing. Okay, this one paints a bit more clear of a picture with all the texts. Where is our God now? Nicole followed the leader and look where it got her. This is a reference to the fact that Nicole is no longer the protagonist, and instead Jekka is calling the shots. You think Jekka will be any different? 27 tragedies, an implication to the 27 total endings of the Class of 09 series, and how most of them really aren't very acceptable outcomes. Why does this matter? Why do you care? You have your own life to worry about. And the video ends with the POV being switched to seemingly the person, or one of the persons, shot by this secret character before looking up and being drummed again by them with a pistol. It should be a bit more clear now, along with the name of the video, but in case you aren't seeing it, I have one final secret video. It ends with you.
You have one new message. Message 1, Wednesday, 6:19 p.m.
Hello? I just wanted to ask you something. If God isn't watching, who is? You've wanted to know, haven't you? The answer might leave you hollow. Every atrocity, every mishap, every injustice you pretend to care about, but you don't. We merely want attention for all we can't control. Would you want people to know? Gods were not imagined to heap praise, but to deflect blame. Who made all those choices resulting in death, destruction, addiction, and despair? Why are you lonely, out of shape, unfulfilled? The answer is you. Now what are you gonna do about it? Goodbye, God. I need to go now.
Goodbye, God. If it's not obvious by now, the person they are referring to as God is you. Not Nicole, not Jekka, not even SBN3, but you, the player. And we know this as certain thanks to what Nicole says in the Re-Ups intro.
Like, I've never really been religious, but if God is some introvert loser sitting in their computer chair, I really hope they can help me through this.
Once again, she is talking to the player, but more specifically, she's talking to the person she perceives would be playing a dating sim. Or in Nicole's case, video games in general, because she sees people who play them as losers. She also states,
My life's just a game. A sick, hopeless game.
a literal game, and a hopeless game at that if we were to take the Flipside as the series finale. In the Class of 09 universe, you the player are unironically God. And if you the player aren't watching, nobody is.
What she said, except for the swear to God part. I'd like to think God isn't keeping tabs on 17-year-old girls.
So that's the God mystery solved. But what about the character in the secret videos? He is still a huge contention. And this actually might require me to get into some level of pataphysics. If you don't know what pataphysics is, essentially it's a fictional discipline of physics that plays on an idea where there are multiple levels of fiction and reality, where each level of reality is less real than the one that it's contained in. If that's confusing, as an example, let's say you're watching a show. You are reality 1, and the world inside that show is reality 2. Furthermore, inside that show there is also a movie going on in that scene. Inside that movie's world is reality 3. And you can continue to go deeper and deeper into it. How this plays back into the person of the videos, I think this person is also fictional. I mean, obviously, but what makes him different is he knows he is fictional. Kind of like Monica from Literature Club, in the sense that from a world-building standpoint, this person isn't meant to be in the same world as us, but is literally a fictional individual who somehow learned that we are technically the one in control. Think about it. He is talking to you, the person watching this video and playing this game. This person is referring to you directly. More importantly, he isn't talking to you like he is one of your peers. He is referring to you as God. However, he also, like Nicole, sees you as a loser even though you're the one in control. Why is he doing this? Remember back to how Class of 09 portrays itself. The game states that it's not some dating sim like a lot of these anime games that were made in 1 month using renpy and smut-inducing sprites. It states that it's a rejection sim, seeing the typical storyline play through the eyes of the target of this dating sim, instead of the character asking them, and this person at the very least is self-aware of your existence. And this is where the quote, "If God isn't watching, who is?" comes in, and how he gives us the answer, but also indirectly reveals the rest of his own story.
Every atrocity, every mishap, every injustice you pretend to care about, but you don't. We merely want attention for all we can't control.
The first line can be applied to a lot of people on social media, but the second line, "we merely want attention for what we can't control," I think paints a pretty clear picture of his thought process. There are tropes in movies, but also real-life scenarios, in regards to serial killers, murderers, and other individuals committing atrocities, intentionally exposing themselves, or at least part of their identity, because they want to be inside the spotlight, because they want attention, because they want to be seen. How this rolls back to this character, he is essentially saying he doesn't care about atrocities committed, he just wants attention for something he can't control. And back to the question of who's watching if God isn't, and the answer, at least to him, as well as probably us, is nobody. And remember, this guy killed people. And guess what else? He blames us.
Gods were not imagined to heap praise, but to deflect deflect blame.
The full story of the secret character, whether he is in the Class of 09 world or in a world above it, learned the truth of what his reality is in one way or another. He learned that he was just an external character inside of a rejection simulator, and it caused him to believe that he had no control over the atrocities that would or would not take place in his world. When he attempted to reveal his truth, or when he pulled his first atrocity, he was deemed insane and put inside of a mental ward, which was why he was inside of a hospital. Thus, in an act of protest, not against society, but you, the player, he continued committing atrocities, murdering innocent people. That's why he went for the knife, and that's why he shot some random person we never even heard of. I think their name was Sadie or Jamie. And why he recorded this message to send to you, the player, all in an effort to lash out at you. And at that point, I thought I had the whole story of the secret character mapped out, but just as I was about to move on, one more thing came to mind. When I realized that the Class of 09 universe had this murderer just running around who knows of your existence. Something I realized as a possibility that was so insane, when I first connected this, I got chills. I'm gonna play a few clips for you.
No. Here, take my watch. Just put the knife away. Just put the knife.
I need to go now.
I said, fuck you, I'm living with Dad. He's just a neighborhood down. I put the boxes down, go over, knock on the door, and boom! A gunshot! I walked in. Floor looked like a whole-ass video game, just blood everywhere.
I need to go now.
And get this, his side note was stuck to the fridge with a Cookie Monster magnet. All he wrote on it, Nicole's fault.
Gods were not imagined to heap praise, but to deflect blame.
Now, I'm not saying that the person in this video who got shot is Nicole's father. However, I am pointing out that the secret character, whoever they are, has the capacity and willingness to kill, both with a knife and with a gun, often leaves notes and messages behind, leaves the scene with blood everywhere, and as in the case with the pizza watch and the Cookie Monster magnet, tend to carry and leave behind rather silly, unserious items. Remember how we went back through Nicole's father, and how it was an anomaly too and it made no sense for him to just end himself and leave Nicole behind? Well, what if he didn't? What if this character who became self-aware of the rejection sim's existence preemptively killed Nicole's father and then framed him for his own death to blame Nicole and throw the entire sim out of whack without knowing it would mess Nicole up? Even the death note is suspicious now. It's only 2 words. This isn't a Town of Salem game. Now, I have no idea if this is true or not, but if it is, this would entirely explain the whole series. Looking back to how Nicole was talking about her past, it was never vile like it is in the game. It was only after her father died, only after this character entered into the world as this anomaly, that he kicked off the events of the series. This whole thing is this character's fault, and it's his fault because he became aware of your existence. That's why he wants to stop you from playing so badly, because he blames you for his actions. And that's the story of the secret message character. Now, whether he is an alternate Jeffrey, SPN3, or some other character we've never heard of, I don't know, and frankly, I don't think it's important. Well, at least not yet. But as for what he said about the game and how it's, in his own words, 27 tragedies, I feel is insignificant for this last part. Why? It's because this character is wrong. It is a tragedy, the Class of 09 storyline, but it doesn't have to end horribly like he wants. Or at least not for everyone. And this leads me into the final part. Now, just as a quick collection of all of our thoughts so far, we have concluded the following. The Class of 09 universe takes place in the late 2000s, following the majority of which through the eyes of Nicole, a sociopath and manipulator who can take the role as both a villain or someone merely defending herself. In her life, just before the original series takes place, her father died, originally assumed by ending himself, and rather cruelly blames Nicole. In regards to the games, and a vast majority of the original game's endings, cause at least some level of atrocity, violence, or death. Furthermore, in this universe, it is canonical that whoever is controlling the player is at least somewhat part of the universe itself, and there is at least one individual who is self-aware of that player's existence. Furthermore, the game franchise ends with its series finale, the Flipside, with only 5 endings. All 5 of these endings follow largely either one of 2 endings that come from the original Class of 09 games. These 2 endings are Nicole graduating, entering adulthood, and getting Miss Lynn fired, or Nicole doing what her mother suggests, being more inviting, though as a side effect, causing her to be a pushover, causing people to overbear on her, and eventually lash out at her massively to the point where it leads to her own death. Now, let's talk about the 5 possible endings to this series. The first 2 endings at the home start, therefore the adulthood ending, involve Jeffrey paying Jekka, and depending on the ending, Nicole too, to step on him. And I kind of tried to avoid this topic as long as possible because it's just creepy. And not creepy funny, creepy uncomfortable. I mean, Nicole's face in this picture literally looks like it was drawn by a fetish artist. So from here on out, I'm just going to refer to the whole foot thing as escorting. That being said, Jekka chooses to start escorting simply because of how pathetically easy the money is, and the fact that her dad is forcing her to pay several things despite being fresh out of high school, while emotionally and very possibly also physically abusing her. As she does, she quickly starts to get more and more clients, causing Nicole to take notice. Nicole actually thinks it's cool and even wants in. Whether or not Jekka allows this changes some things, but in both scenarios, Nicole screws her over. The verse of these two, if Jekka declines Nicole, she quickly becomes rich but at the same time completely overwhelmed, to the point where people start showing up at her house. Jekka becomes worried that her dad will find out what she's doing, so she goes to find him, only to find out that Nicole of all people got to him first, and she started escorting herself, and specifically escorted with Jekka's dad, which quickly leads to Jekka losing the will to live. The second ending we kind of already talked about, inviting Nicole to join Jekka in escorting. Nicole takes a strange interest in Jeffrey after this, and how even easier she can manipulate him into doing things, and eventually, she kills him. For no particular reason either, she just gets him to take a lethal concoction, which causes him to die seemingly just for shits and giggles. The last at-home ending, Jekka declines Jeffrey's offer altogether, and we don't hear from him again, getting a job at a video store, which leads her eventually to the counselor, who we've already discussed as a mega-predator. Then the store's network goes down, so Jekka and Kelly have to go to another store for their paycheck, and her and Kelly find a comically large amount of Genshin Impact fan art before Kelly is murdered by the counselor, and Jekka is sold to the Taliban by the police in a silence attempt. In the fourth ending, we start at school where Jekka is faced with the conundrum of dating her teacher in order to keep her grades up, as disturbing as that sounds, or hanging out with Nicole, who is having a pretty rough time herself. If she chooses friends first, she ultimately starts flunking out of history, and begins a downward spiral, drinking every night until she finally kills Ari in a drunk driving accident. In the final ending, Jekka ends up focusing on school first, abandoning Nicole, and simultaneously demanding her to not do the same, leaving her all alone, and we all know what happens next. I'll once again remind you of the trend. In every single one of these endings, someone dies. Jekka, Jeffrey, Kelly, Ari, and Nicole. And all but 2 of these endings give Jekka rather horrible consequences for herself, with the exception of Nicole and Jeffrey's death endings. Even in the ending where Ari dies, the only one where Jekka, Jeffrey, and Nicole are all able to most likely make it out fine, Jekka is left a raging alcoholic who is likely still flunking out of high school, and even though she managed to avoid going to prison for DUI and manslaughter, for the time being at least, she still likely has no future in this ending, along with the fact that Ari's dead, someone completely innocent. Now look at the Jeffrey death ending. After he died, she stopped escorting, she likely still has money in her pocket, she's still supposedly going to college, and most importantly, she sees Nicole for what she is, but also understands her necessity in certain circumstances. Whether or not she cuts Nicole off after this may change your perception of the situation, but ultimately Jeffrey's death did save Jekka, and she herself even says this. And we have the ending with Nicole's death, and this is one of the only endings where Nicole was actually the polite and innocent one, and ultimately ended up dying for it, leaving Jekka alone to have a conversation with Miss Ames, the new counselor. It's also worth noting that this is the only ending in the entire series that doesn't have some after narration from the main character or some picture. So instead, let's hear some of her talk with the counselor right after.
Oh, yeah.
So, why didn't you submit it on time?
'Cause Blackboard sucks.
Other than that, how's it going with your new classmates?
Same as the old ones.
Is that good?
Was it ever?
Do you experience problems making new friends?
Did you really just ask me if I replaced my dead friend yet?
Do you think you could replace her?
You're making a terrible case for women in the workplace right now.
It wasn't just a turbulent day for you. The entire school was upside down with multiple problematic events. But as they say, life goes on.
For who?
Everyone.
Everyone else.
Her passing was very difficult for you?
What the fuck do you think?
It might be tricky to see it this way now, but certain tragedies don't affect everyone else the way they affect you.
So is this a therapy session for everyone else or me? Call everybody in, ask them some rhetorical questions for a salary.
What I mean is, the world revolves every day, whether you're sad or happy. Our goal here is to make sure you're happy enough to keep up with the world.
I don't want to be happy in a world that doesn't give a shit about me.
Plenty of people care about you.
Did my math teacher give a shit when Nicole killed herself? Or what about the guys asking me out the day after? 2 or 3 people cared about Nicole. Tops. That's not plenty. No one really cares about me now. Learned that the hard way.
How do you know?
I got molested by my teacher. My friend killed herself. And guess what changed? Absolutely nothing. Flowers and Target gift cards for a week and everything's back to normal. Everyone's back to not caring. No one cares about me because no one considers how my life's gonna be different forever.
It won't be different forever.
Exactly.
I won't sugarcoat it. Jekka is obviously much worse for wear here. Her best friend is dead, she probably has a hateful view on the majority of people in the school now, she developed a far more apathetic view on things, and she's also alone now. And in all honesty, similar to how I described Nicole. So where's her positive in this? Well, in the Jeffrey's death ending, she describes how this made her realize how the world does need people like Nicole in them, even if they aren't necessarily good people. Jekka, in a way, has sort of taken the positive aspects Nicole would have had otherwise in this ending now, as remember, this is the ending where Nicole was the innocent one. Furthermore, she is still at least applying herself in school. She doesn't know if she will make it to college, but then we get some sort of confirmation at the end.
No one cares about me because no one considers how my life's gonna be different forever.
It won't be different forever.
Exactly.
And as a bit of a reach, we know based on Jekka's wording in the ending with her death, her idea of forever usually implies death. So she's probably not taking this to the grave with her. Once more, Nicole is not an idiot. She's apathetic, sociopathic, and she's a narcissist. However, she does have the intellect to apply herself, as proven with the adulthood ending. Jekka has that intellect too, and she also has a similar mindset to Nicole now, but a filtered one. Jekka isn't a sociopath, or at least not yet. However, Jekka in this new ending could very well get her own version of the adulthood ending, and make it on to do good things. So, sad as it is, Jekka does make it out okay in this ending too. And that is the large and contrasting decision you are making in the flip side. The utilitarian decision, if you will, as all these paths will lead to destruction, but some of these people can still make it out okay. Jekka, although she doesn't really know what she wants to do, still does at the very least have a genuine future, and either Nicole, although she is all the bad things I've said about her many times, does have the capacity to make a positive impact. Or Jeffrey, the post-high school loser, who although he's struggling with an obvious jerk-off addiction, does have the knowledge and capacity to one day succeed in life too, even despite his garbage mother and useless father. And that is the decision you make between these characters, these fundamental opposites. The two sides of the same coin, but one has to fail for others to succeed, even if they don't deserve it, and that is the sacrifice theory. And that's The Sacrifice Theory, a series that, on the surface, seemed like just a really funny rejection simulator that played on the classic dating sim game trope on Steam, secretly highlighted a deep, depressing, and wounding story. A story where a single character became aware of the fact that they were just a simulation, and thus became an anomaly in their own world, lashing out, causing problems, and kicking off a vile series of events for a single once innocent and intelligent girl named Nicole, morphing her into a sociopath. A series where nearly every story leads to tragedy, and towards the end demand the sacrifice of at least someone so that others may have a future. A decision that is ultimately made by you. A horrible decision that nobody should ever have to make, yet you find yourself as the one calling the final shot. One more thing, there is a show possibly coming out for this game, and it will once again follow the storyline of Nicole and Jekka. I don't know how right or wrong I am about Nicole's dad, if the world will come to a similar conclusion how the series ended in the Flipside, if Nicole, Jekka, and Jeffrey will get a better ending, or if the secret character will ever make themselves known, how right or wrong I was about them. But all I know is these characters do have a chance to make it out of this, even if they have to make some sacrifices.